All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of YouTube. This is Pastor Dow. See if you can find the word Sunday in here.
I think Sunday is preferable. That's just been the tradition that we followed.
Society just has built it in that way, like to go to church on Sundays.
It's just what we've always done, is tradition. Occasionally we might do a Saturday if we had something to do on Sunday.
Usually a lot of us, we work Monday through Friday. We're off on the weekend, and we tend to give a little bit of extra or special time for the prayer on Sundays.
To hear us say thank you. And one of the ways we can say thank you is by praising Him through song.
So from a young child, being brought up, I was always brought up with Sabbath observance. So Friday night sundown and Saturday night sundown, as mentioned in the Ten Commandments, remember the seventh day to keep it holy. And then also Jesus observed Sabbath as well.
Yeah.
So it's one day where I don't check my emails, I don't respond to work calls, I don't read
From
any script.
Friday night
sundown to Saturday night sundown.
Yeah.
No work.
The Sabbath, I think, it was in the Old Testament and the Jewish tradition that they have to don't do anything on the Sabbath, which was a Saturday, I believe.
I think God doesn't care what day people worship.
I know some people would like to make Saturday the special day for praying, but for me, an example, my opinion would be on Sunday.
And see if you can find one place that any of the prophets, any of the apostles, or the Messiah himself, Jesus the Christ, has ever repealed the Sabbath. Show me one commandment.
Welcome back to Face the Truth. Before our break, we learned the commandment regarding the Sabbath no longer applies in the Christian era, and the belief that this should be the exclusive day for worship is not a biblical teaching. Now, what is important is that we worship God. But will all forms of worship be acceptable to God? How can we know if God accepts all forms of worship or not? We're going to read what is written in the book of Matthew, chapter 15, and the verses 9. This is stated, "And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." So, we ask the question, does God accept all forms of worship or all those who worship Him? Well, what we read is that there are those who worship God, but their worship of God is in vain, which is the equivalent to being useless or unacceptable to God. Why? Because their worship is not based on God's commandments. Instead, they are based on commandments of man or human teachings and commandments. So what then is worship based on God's teachings and commandments? Who does God seek to worship Him? We will read now John chapter 4, a verse we read earlier in our lesson. John chapter 4, and the verse is 23. Christ said, "But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship Him." Now, Christ mentioned that the Father is seeking the true worshipers to worship Him. Now, when Christ mentioned that there are true worshipers being sought by the Father, it also indicates to us that there are others who are considered as false worshipers. Well, how can one be acceptable to God, gain the right to worship God, or how can one become a true worshiper? Hebrews 9 and 14, "How much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. Notice, based on what we have read, for one to be able to serve God, for one to be able to worship God, one has to be cleansed from dead works or sins. What is the only thing that can cleanse a person from dead works or sins for them to have the privilege and right to worship God? It is only the blood of Christ that can cleanse us from sin. So we have to find out now which was redeemed or which was purchased with the blood of Christ. We'll read from the book of Acts. The chapter is 20 and the verse is 28. Take heed therefore to yourselves and to all the flock over which the Holy Spirit has appointed you overseers, to feed the church of Christ, which he has purchased with his blood. The church of Christ, based on the teaching of the Bible, was redeemed by Christ with his blood. This is then what people should be concerned about when we're talking about worship and serving God. Instead of concentrating or worrying about what particular day one should worship, because any day can be a day of worship, we should first be concerned about if we are among the members of the Church of Christ who have been cleansed or redeemed by the blood of Christ. Because being redeemed by the blood of Christ gives us the right and the privilege to serve God. It is only then that we could be considered by God as true worshipers and be able to fulfill our inherent duty to worship our Almighty Creator. And so the truth may be painful at first, but whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not, the truth is something we all must face. Thanks for joining us. I am Brother Barry Thompson. Until next time, God bless.